For a lot of reasons, reading that whole book to you, you know, it was, Helena Silverstein's Girls on the Stand, which you're able to pick up anytime you want. A soft back copy of it is pretty cheap. If you want all the references that were in it, you're welcome to buy a copy of it yourself. I would say that to Helena and this whole thing, to Professor, Doctor as well of law, I am sorry if you felt that that was piracy towards your book, but it's an old book from like 2007, and the case has never really ultimately been comprehensively laid out here on YouTube, and these days that is kind of one of the public forums for debate, and it is being neglected and has been this whole time, and so it fell on me to actually booktube it and read it to YouTube to articulate the case in this matter, because unfortunately, like, I think that when you don't actually hear the most comprehensive case, like, this is a hard one to go up against, and it's one of the only issues in which there's broad bipartisan consensus and the abortion debate. So to dismantle the compromise that came, and to come out against parental notification and consent laws requires a much more comprehensive convincing of the public than other debate issues, especially because this is one in which it's easy to see it through the lens of a very simplistic moral dualist perspective, and everything like abortion's wrong, or like through the lens of parental rights and everything else, and that this is an infringement on the rights of parents, but when you actually see how the legal system actually contends with things and the reality on the ground compared to what our expectations are, it has a pretty powerful dissuading effect against the case for parental involvement mandated by the state. I think that I would say that my frustration with parental notification laws, among other things, is just that while it is indisputable that teenagers tend to do better when their parents are aware of what's going on, and I'm not here to dispute that at all. In fact, I actually thoroughly agree with it, but unfortunately, not all parents are the right type of parent. There are abusive parents that are out there. That's just a reality. To think otherwise would be naive at best. And because of that, and because of the fact that this exists, there had to be this compromise that was taken and come to. But I've long resented having to do this and having this task fall on my avenue, because I didn't want to be the one to bring things forward, and I couldn't articulate it without Helena Silverstein's book to show you exactly what the problem was with the system at hand, and why this just wasn't working. And because unfortunately the abortion debate has always been a very emotional and fraught one. It's always been one of people having very strong convictions one way or the other. It's been polarized my whole life, and it's been a very difficult discussion to get into and to engage. And so I have not wanted to weigh in on thorny issues like that are just used as complete wedges in the whole thing, not because I don't embrace controversy so frequently, but this was just one in which I felt that the issues were so controversial that coming out on one side or another could literally put your life in danger. It was not a task that I really took lightly or wanted to fall in my direction, but it kind of felt like in public, the case against it in a setting that was accessible to the general public had never really been comprehensively laid out. And so what we were having was not a discussion that really considered the whole issue in a very broad way, but instead a discussion that was just based on the basis of very short statements that people were making toward each other. And so it was easy to sloganeer the thing for the people on the other side, which was just, Keister thinks that, people should be that they should be able to keep things from their parents. That's horrible. And I'm just sitting there like, if somebody has an opinion like that, maybe they maybe they've got some reasons to hold to a rather extreme view on what is seen as an extreme view in your case. But truthfully, I came out swinging on the issue for a lot of reasons that I was guided to by the professor. I can see how a system that puts minors through having to make a shit ton of phone calls, to people that are often not even in town or off doing other things and having other obligations, and having to get a hold of it, and how outdated brochures and everything else would pose a very significant burden on somebody seeking this kind of injunctive relief. And so it's like, of notification and consent laws, the problems with that, like I said, it's completely indisputable that minors do better, but it was never really articulated. I guess you could say that for me, and from my vantage point, I looked at it, I looked out there, I was like, is there a problem that these laws are actually here to solve? Because my frustration on this issue is that the research isn't really showing that we've got an issue with teenage girls, trying to keep and conceal pregnancies from their parents at a scale that is wide enough to justify laws like this. We don't, what we see, I mean, you could point to the judicial bypass cases, you could point to those and look at them through this lens and say, well, these girls are trying to keep it secret. But it's like I said, not every parent deserves to be a parent in our society. That's just the unfortunate reality of America. Child abuse has not been completely eradicated in America yet, and I don't know if it ever will be, but we can do something about it, and our society does take it quite seriously and does do something about it in most of the time. So that is a merit in America's favor. But now I am personally opposed on these grounds, basically because I don't think that parental notification laws are actually in place to solve a problem that has been proven to exist on the ground, because I really have not seen what I would consider to be convincing evidence that there are a significant number of women who are literally trying to conceal it from their parents, and for no solid, good goddamn reason, So I think that's a good way to articulate one of the reasons why I find myself opposed. But there's also just the judicial bypass from everything we know about the compromise at this point, and everything that we've been taught about it now. You can't look at the reality on the ground and think that these laws are working out in a way that doesn't fail these minors, and turn them into having to face abuse, but at the hands of the existing state in these jurisdictions. So, like, personally, it's like, unfortunately, these laws really aren't on the books to solve a problem that really exists in any kind of wide spread scale. And so it's like, why do we need them? I mean, why I can't argue against the fact that minors tend to do better when their parents are involved in this decision. I mean, that's indisputable. What I find so troubling in my review of all this is why were these laws enacted in the first place? Like, was there a problem that these laws actually solved where minors were just being petty and trying to keep it from their parents because reasons? You know, like, that is what I find so troubling about it. Because though, if you could reasonably demonstrate that there were that it was the norm and that most teenagers were trying to conceal it from it, or a large enough population that there needed to be laws on the books compelling notification in the first place, then I would say that there was a justification for the laws at hand. But unfortunately, the debate that we've actually seen, in favor of, notification laws has not been on that basis. It's been on the basis of the fact that outcomes tend to be better when parents are involved. And it's like, sure, but why do we need to get the state involved to force notification? What is the what is the problem that's being solved here? And so it's like my own slant here, is, parental notification and consent laws are a solution in search of a problem that has not been convincingly demonstrated to exist in the first place. Unfortunately, you can argue that, outcomes tend to be better, but this problem has not been demonstrated to exist on a widespread enough basis to justify laws like this being on the books in the first place. I would say that about the whole thing, and that is my ultimate objection, is just that these laws are not actually solving something that can be said to exist at any kind of meaningful scale. And it's like, as a researcher, as somebody that tends to follow the preponderance of the evidence, that tends to favor, peer-reviewed research of large populations, that was taught to think that way by concordance on this platform, to avoid appeals to anecdotal evidence, to not make major decisions on the basis of anecdotes, not be convinced on the basis of self-contained stories. And, if you can only find a case study of a single person who did this and kept this for no good solid reason and it ended up facing adverse outcomes, you really have not articulated a convincing enough case to actually go forward on that. And unfortunately, yes, you can find cases like she outlined Rachel Ellie's case, which was horrible, admittedly, but Rachel Ellie is an anecdotal minor that is being used to justify a law in a blanket fashion on all minors. And that's what I find so troubling about this, is that her case and her behavior in that was not convincingly demonstrated to be a normal teenage girl's behavior and what most teenage girls would do in her situation. It was only demonstrated to be, a problem in her individual case. And so making a legal case for these laws on the basis of like one or two antidotes is just not a convincing enough argument for me. Like, if you are able to lay out a comprehensive case that there is a widespread problem with teenagers trying to keep this decision from their parents, and keep it secret, and it's not on the basis of abuse, and it can't be on the basis of legitimate concerns, and they just do it because, teenagers are rebellious and secretive. I mean, if you could lay out a comprehensive case that is actually a big problem and that it happens frequently, then maybe I would say that we should start looking towards making laws like this. But that has never been done. And like I said, these laws were originally justified on the basis that teenagers tend to do better when their parents are involved. I mean, that sidesteps the issue entirely for me. It's like, is there because there's no reason to have these laws unless they solve a problem that is widespread on the ground, and that is not how things have actually been practiced.